Okay, welcome everyone to a new episode of Technique Tuesday. This week we're going to be looking at how to perform the lat pull-down with perfect technique while correcting common errors when it comes to execution. Now, before we jump into the biomechanics, let's quickly consider the pull-down versus the pull-up. I think some people put pull-ups on a bit of a pedestal, and while if I was forced to pick a pull-up or a pull-down, I'd pick the pull-up for reasons I outlined in my Pull-Up Technique Tuesday video. I think both movements can have their place in a complete training program. I like to think of the pull-up as a main heavy movement geared more toward progressive overload in the, say, 5 to 10 rep zone, whereas the pull-down functions better as a mind-muscle connection type movement. Although you certainly should aim to overload when possible, the goal is to really focus on feeling the muscles of the back contract appropriately, a concept that's gained attention and empirical support in the scientific literature in recent years. Also, if you're not able to do a bodyweight pull-up, pull-downs certainly can help build some base strength, but I think you're better off doing assisted pull-ups as they're gonna have more strength carryover. Doing a pull-down to help build pull-up strength would be kind of like doing push-ups to build bench press strength. So with a standard overhand grip lat pull-down, we're training several biomechanical actions at once. The main action involved is shoulder adduction, where the lats, along with the teres major and minor muscles, contract to bring the arms down to the side. Because it's impossible to pull the bar straight down, there will be some degree of shoulder extension occurring as well, mainly handled by the lats and the long head of the triceps. And the biceps and brachialis muscles are going to take care of the elbow flexion component, where the elbow is forced to bend in order to bring the weight down. Now, while you can move a decent amount of weight with the lat pull down, especially the more you lean back, I think that when loaded too heavily, the lower back and momentum will simply start to take over, which can then reduce overload on the actual lats. So in my experience, using more moderate weight, somewhere in the 8 to 12 rep zone, tends to be the sweet spot. Now, as I discussed in my video on back width versus back thickness, you can use different grips here to slightly emphasize different regions of the back, but in general, I tend to prefer the double overhand medium grip brought to the front of the neck, since this option tends to provide the best combination of strength and biceps and lat activation. So let's cover this variation first. So first, you want to make sure the knee pads are adjusted to the right height before sitting down. If you have to go on your toes for your knees to brace against the pads, you could be losing some stability, and your butt is going to try to lift up on every rep. So if you can't keep your heels planted while having your knees secure, lay down a couple 10 or 25 pound plates to elevate your feet. You want to grab the bar with a roughly 1.5 times shoulder width grip. Many trainees find a thumbless or suicide grip to be much better at improving the mind-muscle connection with the lats. And on the pull down, this really isn't a safety concern, unlike on the bench press, where if the bar slips, you're going to get crushed underneath it. With the bar in your hands, take a seat and brace your knees against the pads with your heels on the ground or on the plates. And before initiating the first rep, put your upper back into thoracic extension by lifting your chest up. And while some people prefer to have a flat upper back so they can pull straight down, I think an extended upper back is going to create a more secure and powerful lifting position. Begin the first rep by depressing your scapulae, or tucking your shoulder blades down as you pull your elbows in toward your sides at about a 10 to 15 degree angle when viewed from the top. So think about pulling your elbows down and in rather than just pulling with your hands by using your arms. At the bottom of the pull, the bar should make light contact with the top of your sternum on your upper chest. And from this point, you can reverse the motion by actively resisting the negative as you feel your lats stretch on the way up. Once you reach full elbow extension, lift your chest up, depress your shoulder blades again, and start another rep. So how much should you lean back on the lat pull down? Now, some folks insist you need to be perfectly upright, while others suggest that since you can move more weight with more lean back, that's what you should do. My opinion is somewhere in the middle. I think a moderate degree of lean back is acceptable if it makes the lift feel more natural to you, especially if it also allows you to overload better. And as a general rule, even if you lean back a bit, the cable should still travel in a pretty straight line when viewed from the side. Now, as an advanced technique, I'm actually cool with using moderate momentum or cheating on the positive to help get the weight down, as long as you control the negative on the way up. Now, this might seem like a bit of a bro technique, but it's actually a pretty reasonable way to eccentrically overload the lats when done properly. Now, granted, many people take this to the extreme and just lose complete control, essentially turning the pull down into an inverted row and then just letting the weight fall on the negative, which is something I'd never recommend. Now, of course, other grips such as the neutral grip pull down can also be used. And because this grip is going to emphasize shoulder extension, many trainees just feel their lats working better here. That isn't necessarily my favorite option because you'll already most likely be training plenty of extension with any rowing in your program, but it's still a solid option. And the same principles apply to the supinated grip, except to avoid wrist pain, I generally recommend gripping the bar closer at about 1 times shoulder width. If you're trying to get your biceps a little more involved, this might be a more reasonable grip variation to use as well. So I would say the most common error that I see with the pull down is using too much body English. Apart from using the cheat pull down as a specific modality for eccentric overloading, I think that as a more mind muscle connection based exercise, your position should be more or less stable throughout the movement as you focus on feeling your lats contract as hard as possible rather than just yanking the weight with your arms, lower back, and traps. Another common error when using the medium overhand grip is not adducting the shoulder enough. In other words, many people will pull their elbows down to the front too much, emphasizing shoulder extension rather than pulling the elbows more out to the side. Viewed from the top, your elbows shouldn't be coming forward by 45 degrees or so. Your elbows should only be coming forward by about 10 to 15 degrees as you do the pull down. Now, another very common error when doing the underhand supinated pull down is to pull with the biceps too much. Even though biomechanical reasoning does suggest that the biceps will engage more on this lift, you still want to think of it as a back movement, merely using your arms as connectors while focusing on driving your elbows down more like you would in a pullover. Now, if you're unable to do lat pull downs, lat pull-ins can be a nice alternative, which only require a simple cable setup. However, I tend to reserve these more for a warm-up or pre-activation type movement. And then of course, the pull-up is a great exercise that trains much of the same musculature. And I think that if you want to maximize your overall back development, you should probably be including some kind of pull-up and some kind of horizontal row in your routine.